everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Medieval Reader. So today I would like to talk about another book in the French canon, and that is Indiana by George Sand. So George Sand was a 19th century author whose real name was Aurore Dudevant. But like many women in the 19th century, she took a male name so that she would be able to publish. So Indiana was her first novel, and it is famous for being an early feminist or proto-feminist novel. Now, while I definitely see elements of that in this work, I think that reading this work today raises a lot of questions about what we mean when we call something feminist. Perhaps the reason why Indiana is often considered an early feminist work is because our heroine stands up at one point in particular to her abusive husband and basically says that she will do whatever she wants to do and that he must not interfere with her freedom. That is the one scene that comes to mind when I think about this book as a piece of feminist literature. But in other ways, Indiana is a victim of her circumstances. She's someone who is constantly going back to her abusive lover, as well as remaining with her husband. It's kind of hard to see how this work can be feminist. Nevertheless, George Sand was a socialist. She was someone who was very critical of her society and the way in which society was structured to benefit the rich. She does make some references to that in her prefaces, but mostly her prefaces are a defense of her work. She's saying, look, this isn't a moralistic tale. I'm not prescribing anything. I'm simply painting the truth. And so in that way, she claims that her work is very realist. But of course, this work could also fit into the Romanticism period of literature because it is very melodramatic, and I will get to that in a moment. But first, the plot. So our heroine is Indiana Delmar. She is married to a former military captain, Monsieur Delmar. And Monsieur Delmar was somehow able to remain wealthy despite a regime change in France. So he fought for Napoleon. And then once Napoleon was ousted and the Bourbon monarchy was restored during what is known as the Restauration, the Restoration, Madame Delmar's aunt, Madame de Carvajal, she made some very strategic alliances which allowed her family to not be disgraced. Military people who fought for Napoleon would be disgraced during the Restoration, as we see in the novella Le Colonel Chabert by Honoré de Balzac. So Balzac's Colonel Chabert is a novella where our protagonist, the colonel, is disgraced once Napoleon is ousted and the Bourbon monarchy is restored. But here, Indiana's aunt, she knows people, and so she's able to save her family's reputation. Nevertheless, Indiana does not love her husband. Her husband is abusive. He is constantly insulting her. They do not love each other one bit. But he's also extremely naive because Indiana has a lover, and up until the very end, when the captain gets this letter proving that Indiana has been in a relationship with another man, he doesn't know. Everybody else, it seems, knows, but somehow he just doesn't see it, which I just think is so funny. So yeah, he's naive, he's very aggressive, and he's abusive. Indiana, she is someone who has some self-confidence, but at the same time, she too can be naive, and so she is just looking for love in all the wrong places. And the wrong place in this novel is in the person of Raymond de Ramière. So Raymond is, in the beginning of the story, being pursued by the captain and his friend because they think that he was stealing something from the house. And he gets shot. He doesn't die. But as he is bleeding out, Ralph is the cousin of Indiana, and he actually was like a father figure for her as she was growing up. And he's taking care of this man who was mistaken for a thief. And what we come to learn is that Raymond, the guy who was just shot, was actually in a relationship with Noun. I guess that's how her name is pronounced. Noun, like a noun, who is a servant in the household. So he's actually having this relationship with this servant, and so he wasn't a thief, but he was in the household, and that is why he was mistaken for a thief. Madame Delmare falls in love with him, and Raymond pretends to be in love with her. But really what we come to see is that Raymond really likes to feel like he is in control of women, that he can assert his influence over women. He's someone who's desperately in need of recognition, and he just wants to be in power. He is a wealthy person, just like Madame Delmare is, so they are of the same social class. But even so, here, while he is pretending to be in love with Madame Delmare, he's also in a relationship with Noun, and Madame Delmare is not aware of that. Unfortunately, Noun gets pregnant, and then she tells Raymond, and then Raymond tries to hide her away, and then he's hiding in Madame Delmare's house, and Madame Delmare finds him, and then it becomes clear to Noun that he doesn't really love her, that he prefers Madame Delmare, and so she kills herself. She's found dead in a lake. So there is that. In a way, Raymond has blood on his hands now. But Madame Delmare isn't really aware that Raymond was in a relationship with Noun. Like, she doesn't see that yet. Ralph, who was her cousin, or who is her cousin, and who was a father figure to her as she was growing up, he knows, okay? And he has contemplated killing Raymond quite a few times. As we come to see later, there are other reasons. But at the moment, it's clear that Ralph cares about Madame Delmare and wants her to be safe, and Raymond is a parasite. So, he's a predator. So, he wants to kill him. He goes, I wish he had just died. I wish I just killed him right when he was injured from being shot. Madame Delmare just continues to go back to Raymond. No matter what happens, Raymond will not show her the attention that she wants, and then he will apologize, and she will accept him, and it just gets out of hand. While I'm reading this, I'm like, come on, you need to dump this guy, he's not worth your time. The only person in the household, other than, of course, the two who know about this affair, is Ralph. Ralph is also friends with Monsieur Delmare, which is an interesting situation because Monsieur Delmare, as I've pointed out, is abusive, and yet Ralph is still friends with the husband. They see eye to eye on things. Ralph is a fan of the Napoleonic era, whereas Raymond is more of a fan of the Restoration. So Ralph and Raymond do not see eye to eye politically, but Ralph and Monsieur Delmare do. There's a bit of politics that is discussed in this work. Raymond is a very refined man. He speaks really well. He tells the women what they want to hear. but he just uses women and then discards them when they no longer interest him. He pretends that he cares about these women. These women will write him, Madame Delmar will say, "Oh, I love you so very much," and he'll be like, "Yeah, I love you too." But then when she asks, "Hey, can we, go off together?" he chickens out and he just won't commit. So, somewhere in the middle of the work, we learned that the captain suddenly lost all his fortune. And so he leaves and he goes to the Île Bourbon, which is part of the Reunion Islands, which are off the coast of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. Madame Delmar actually grew up there with Ralph, so she knows this place, and so they leave. Raymond stays behind. Raymond basically uses his mother, who does basically anything for her son, to get rid of Madame Delmar. And, again, that's a sign that he's not interested, but somehow she doesn't get the message. So they're on the island. Her husband actually physically abuses her, and Ralph does not stand up to the captain, which, again, it just shows how, what kind of a friend, paternal figure is Ralph. That's a really interesting question in this work. So she runs away, decides she's going to go back to France, and she's going to reunite with Raymond, and that life will be great. And she returns only to find that Raymond is married to another woman who married him fully for financial reasons, and he married her fully for financial reasons, and she is distraught. Ralph has learned that she ran away. He finds her in Paris, and they decide that they're going to commit suicide together. Right. It is really interesting, the theme of suicide. Suicide is presented very romantically in this work, and I think that makes this book perhaps difficult to read for some people, because suicide is not romantic, and it is presented as such in this work. So here I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be the typical French novel where the characters, out of desperation, kill themselves at the end, but there is a twist. So Ralph and Madame Delmar, they return to the Île Bourbon, to this precipice where they used to, I guess, hang out, and they decide they're going to commit suicide together. And so they prepare themselves, and they are uniting themselves with nature. They're not really Christian, they do believe in God, and so there's a little bit of that discussed in this work. And they are preparing to throw themselves off this precipice, and then Ralph confesses to Madame Delmar that he loves her. Now, cousins falling in love with each other at this time, I guess legally would be considered incestuous, but also it's acceptable, okay? And he says that he loves her. It's not so much the incestuous element that really disturbs me, it's the fact that he was a father figure for her. And he talks about how, when she was a child, he was really in love with her, but he never, really did anything. He was always very respectful towards her. He never abused that power, but that also he was in love with her. And then he was in love with Noun. Anyway, it's a really interesting romantic relationship for sure. And yeah, he confesses that he loved her. Madame Delmar is really moved, and she realizes that even though Ralph was never this very eloquent person, he was nothing like Raymond, who could speak very well, that really deep down he had a soft core, that he really cared about Madame Delmar. And then he confesses that he should have killed Raymond in the beginning, and he had many chances to do so, but he never did because he didn't want to let on that he really loved her, and he wanted to do what was best for her. Anyway, so he doesn't kill him. And so then they decide, okay, well, they're going to now just jump off the cliff together, and it will be peaceful, and they will land in the waterfall, and they will just drown together. But what you learn in the conclusion, there's a concluding chapter, is that there was this mysterious wind that pushed Ralph back onto the pavement, and his eyes were opened and he realized that he could have this new life with Madame Delamare. And so they do. They do not kill themselves, which was an interesting twist to a novel that was in many ways very typical of a French romance. They do not kill each other. And instead they live together. I suppose they get married, and they live on the island caring for the slaves, because this is a French colony. They care for the slaves even though they cannot, really contribute to their emancipation. They care for their medical needs, and they're so happy that they are away from civilization, which is so corrupt, and now they are living peacefully in this utopian island that represents man in the state of nature. There is definitely this Rousseau-esque theme, subplot in this work, and there's a lot of references to Paul et Virginie. Paul et Virginie is a short, basically a novella written by Bernardin de Saint-Pierre a century earlier, I believe. And basically it's about this brother and sister who grow up together, and then they fall in love with each other, but then the sister, she's sent off to Europe and she's corrupted by society, whereas before they lived just pure and without sin because they were living in the Americas, even though they also had slaves. And so yeah, this kind of romantic view of the state of nature, of the world without civilization, is definitely in this novel. And basically the narrator, who up till now we didn't even know who the narrator was, it seemed like this omniscient narrator, we learned that he actually met up with this couple on the island, and he discovers that they're still alive and that their life is really great and they live happily ever after. So that is our extremely melodramatic story. The worst part, I think, is right in the last part before the conclusion, where Ralph confesses that he loves her, and he goes on and on and on, and it is so melodramatic. Never shall it be said that Madame Bovary is the most melodramatic romance. Indiana is worse. It is extremely saccharine. I gave this book ultimately 2 stars. I must admit, I did not love it. The first half I was incredibly interested, but the second half not so much. The reason why I'm making this video is because it is part of the French canon. It is considered historically and literarily important, and I do know people who really love it. So, perhaps if you like Jane Austen, you might like this. It wasn't really for me, but I do appreciate some of the themes that were discussed, and I would be interested in reading something else by Sand. I mean, this was her first novel, but I personally wouldn't recommend it, though I think that it is a work that you should know the plot of and know why it is historically significant. So let me know if you've read Indiana and your thoughts, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.